Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm so excited to welcome Carol Wyatt to the podcast. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So to start, I wanted to ask you, did you always know you wanted to pursue a career in animation?
No,
Hmm.
I had no idea. I grew up in Kentucky and I knew I was going to be an artist, maybe a graphic designer, but I had no idea I'd end up in California or in entertainment. Um, I love to draw cartoons all the time. I drew Snoopy and Woodstock, and I would trace and draw them all the time and then send them to like Charles M. Schultz and send them and say, look what I did. So I was really passionate about it, but I didn't realize there was a career for that. Like I had no idea. So it was kind of something I fell into when I moved out here after graduating from college.
Oh, nice. That's amazing. So how did you go about developing your skills? Was it just something that, like, did you eventually take classes for it and things like that?
For animation or for everything?
I guess actually just even starting just with drawing as well. And then,
Drawing.
yeah, for both, I would say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I drew, just like all artists. I mean, I drew every day and I
Mhm.
wrote too. I like to write also, but I never stopped. And so I would make my own books and I would make posters. And then as I got older, like my grandfather would hire me to do things for him, like posters or little commercial jobs. So I knew that I could do it, and I didn't really take outside classes, just my high school class, and which we had a really good teacher. And then when I went to college, I did go to Otis Parsons, and I attended here in Los Angeles and spent one semester in New York, and came back here and graduated in Los Angeles. But I did know I wanted to pursue like graphic design. I wanted to be an art director or design basically for commercials and posters and be an illustrator.
Oh, nice. That's really amazing. And so you mentioned Charles Schultz. Would you say he was one of like your earliest creative influences?
Definitely, that was probably the biggest. Yeah, I was a Snoopy fanatic when I was a little kid. That was when I was very young. And then also, I was so attracted to humor. So I've always been attracted to comedy. Like it's just been a thing for me my whole life. But I loved the Bugs Bunny cartoons and just thought they were genius, like the writing. And I just couldn't stop laughing. And then I also loved the Pink Panther,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, I mean, that was really fun too. I guess slapstick and that good old-fashioned comedy really drew me in.
That's fantastic. I know because those like they're absolutely timeless. All of those like Looney Tunes, certainly chart like Peanuts, that kind of stuff. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those were the biggest influences for sure. And then also, live action was a huge influence for me. I didn't even know it at the time, but I was addicted to like Laugh-In was on. I'm from the 60s to 70s generation. So I watched Laugh-In and Mary Tyler Moore and the Dick Van Dyke Show. And the comedy in those shows was so good, the timing and the writing. And I loved it so much that like I used to watch the Dick Van Dyke Show, and every time they had a scene in the writer's room where they're joking around and bantering, I was like, I want to be there. I want to live in that room. I love that room. And so I had no idea I would end up like in those rooms
Oh,
as a career.
that's amazing though. Yeah, like just having that dream and then making it a reality. That's fantastic. So what basically led to you getting your first job in the industry? And what was your first job in the industry?
Okay, so yeah, I had no idea I'd end up in animation. When I graduated from Otis Parsons in the 80s, there were only about three animation schools that were really good animation schools in anywhere like Canada and the United States. So they needed animators And I was a professional illustrator. I was doing like album covers and magazines and newspapers and, things like that. You could make a career in illustration back then, which now it's all digital, but back then they really needed illustrators and it was a big art form. So that was my career. And then a friend called me and said, "Hey, we need painters over here on this cartoon, this Saturday morning cartoon at Deke." And it was, I can't remember if it was, I worked on The Real Ghostbusters and Cops and a few other shows over there. I don't know which one I started on. I don't remember. But I went over there and I started painting and I was like, oh, I'm getting paid oh, this is kind of nice. I kind of like that I can just paint things and get paid better.
Nice.
And yeah, and yet at the same time I kept all my personal stuff going because working in animation, you're always working on someone else's project. You're never working on your own thing. So I had my illustration and I had gallery shows in Los Angeles, and that fulfilled me creatively. And then I would go paint in animation. So I wasn't quite sure yet, but that was how it all started.
Oh, nice. That's really cool. I do find that interesting because, like, of course, you want to be developing your own stuff, have your own unique voice as an artist, but then it's ironic because then you have to have the same style as whatever series it may be that you're working on. So I do always find that interesting. You have to kind of be a chameleon, so to speak, I would think, right? Just like knowing each way to design characters specific to any given show.
You do. And it's a really difficult thing because sometimes you get really tired of it. You don't want to do other people's styles. And yet, other times, like now in my career, because I've been doing this for 35 years, I really love the collaboration. And I have such close friends, and every crew you're on is like a family. So it feels like a big family. And I really enjoy it now. Like I've just kind of accepted the fact that I'm working on other people's projects, but I'm giving them a lot of my own talent, and I really enjoy that part of it. But it's a huge collaboration.
I'm sure, I mean, obviously, when the pandemic hit, then things changed with working from home. And have you been able to go back to the studio and things like that?
I work on Rick and Morty right now, and a few people have gone back to the studio, but the majority of us are still working from home, which is great for me because I have a son and it's easier for me that way.
I'm still remote too with my job, which I prefer because that's what helped me move to the West Coast since I'm from the East Coast. So, I agree. I'd like the flexibility of it personally. But I wanted to ask you specifically about The Simpsons because obviously that is such an influential show, not just in animation, but in pop culture in general. So I'd love to hear about your experience on The Simpsons.
Oh gosh, that was a huge
Hmm.
part of my career for sure. And I think I learned the most on that show because I wasn't really, even though I was working at Deke and I started getting some commercial jobs, I was working on like Keebler commercials and, I was doing a lot of different jobs, animating, painting, ink and paint, um, layout, whatever they needed, basically. You would just do whatever they asked. And I didn't really take it that seriously yet. And I went to look up a job, on a job board, and I was looking through papers and I saw The Simpsons from the Tracy Ullman shorts. And I'm like, I want to work on that. So I called Gabor Chupo
Oh, mm.
and I said, I want an interview, but it was perfect timing because they were hiring for the series and they needed a lot of people. So I went over for an interview and they weren't hiring just yet. So he put me on a Beastie Boys commercial. I mean, a music video. So I was on a Beastie Boys music video first and
Wow.
painted on that. And then just transferred me right onto The Simpsons right at the beginning and when we were starting it. And that was amazing because I wasn't taking things that seriously yet. And all of a sudden, I'm working with people like uh, Rich Moore, Brad Bird, David Silverman, Wes Archer, who's a good friend of mine still to this day. And they taught me everything. They taught me how to animate. I didn't really know what I was doing. You know, people were saying, do this, do that. And I just kind of did it. But I didn't realize there was a whole art form behind it and that you could really get involved and tell stories through the paint, through color, through lighting, and really enhance stories. Like I knew it in live action. I saw in cinematography. I was a huge fan of art direction, but I had no idea that animation had the same thing, that you could be this filmmaker type of person in animation. So I was working with Brad Bird on one of his episodes, and Krusty gets busted, and
Oh,
and
right.
he had a lot of parodies in there and things from some famous films, and it was kind of the first time. He was very passionate. If you've ever seen Brad Bird, he's very passionate. He jumps up and down, and he's really fun. And he got me so worked up and motivated to like do this great thing, like paint this or light this and make it look really cool. You can do it, whatever you want. And I had never thought of it that way. So it was a good introduction into actual film, and television and how to make things really good. So take it from the level of just being good to excellent, really, really enhancing the story and the creativity.
That's really amazing. That's true. Like with any story, it doesn't matter the medium. It's just about telling the story and like what's the best way to do that and the most creative way. That's really, really cool. So I know you are a color designer. You've done that for a lot of shows. What does that entail exactly? Like you're basically creating the palette for the series?
Yeah, it is really difficult to understand unless you actually see it. But in live action, I compare it to cinematography, basically. I mean, it encompasses art direction, but you're not art directing specifically, but you're doing a piece of that. So you're basically meeting with the directors, the art directors, or the show creator, whoever you're supposed to meet with, and you're getting the story from them, and the emotions are really important. So you're basically telling the story through color and lighting. So those are emotional components to stories. So before it gets to color, it's all black and white. It's line art. And line art can't tell the story in the same way as color. It is beautiful, and they give you, they're giving you the template, and then you take it and you can make it sad, happy, horrific, dangerous. You can enhance it through the lighting. You make something very dark and stormy and scary and add some fog, or you can make something really happy and fun, like a birthday party, and that way, when you're watching it, it's subliminal. People don't really realize it. They're feeling the feelings as you're going through.
Absolutely. Yeah, because that's definitely like just kind of capturing emotion with color. That's beautiful. Just kind of like I could just like envision things and like certain scenes that pop out of me, just like thinking of certain animated movies and shows like the reds or blues for song, like all these different things. That's really, really amazing. I'd love to hear kind of some takeaways from a few specific projects, if you'll indulge me. So I'd love to first hear about, this is personally my all-time favorite childhood cartoon, your work on Rugrats, actually, and just kind of your memories of working on Rugrats.
Well, Rugrats, I probably worked on the least because I only worked on the pilot.
Okay.
But I did work on the pilot, and that was one of my. I probably did the most animating on that pilot than I've ever done, and I learned a lot from Wes Archer. So this is what's interesting. Rugrats was going while Simpsons was going, so we were all at Klasky Csupo. And basically anything that came into Klasky Csupo, we worked on. So I was thrown on Duckman, Rugrats, any commercial, any music video, literally anything that came in the studio, I worked on.
Duckman is a brilliant show. I just watched it for the first time last year after the creator passed away, sadly. So yeah, brilliant show. Like so ahead of its time, that series. Oh my God. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Well, Duckman too, it was really interesting. Everett Peck, who died last year, he was the head of our illustration department at Otis. So he was major in my life because he taught me all 4 years. And then I ended up working with him on his cartoon on Duckman. And he was a big influence too. Huge.
Nice. That's really wonderful. Because I know Duckman also, it was a comic first, right? Like a lot of these shows, they start as even Peanuts too, of course, the comic
Mhm.
strip, all these a lot of projects like that. That's really cool.
Or a
I'd love
toy.
to.
It starts as a toy.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, that's funny. And then Bill just to sell toys to
Mhm.
kids, right? Oh gosh, that's funny. You also worked on the Hey Arnold pilot as well. That's so cool
Yeah.
too. I love Hey Arnold. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, that was another one. Craig Bartlett was at the studio and um, he was putting together Arnold, and he had done some little stop motion claymation cartoons for Pee Wee Herman show. So
Mm.
I was a fan already because I was a big fan of Pee Wee and all of the artists. I knew all the artists that worked on it. I knew them by name. And when I heard Craig Bartlett was in the building, I went right over and I said, "Hey." And he showed me his little claymation characters, and he had them on his desk. And so we hit it off. And when it was time to do the pilot, I was hired as the art director on that pilot, which was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, amazing. So obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but the art director basically like you have like you're the one that they have to go through for like everything that's on screen, correct? Like just
Well, yeah,
everything.
it's huge. You're designing the look of the entire thing.
Mm.
But with Craig, he already had a style of his own and he was very specific. A lot of show creators are very specific. So he already knew what he wanted, and I basically had to again like be a chameleon and imitate his style and design in his style. So you kind of have to think like they do and take on the personality that they're trying to get across in the story. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a challenge. I like challenges, so it's really fun. But I also just had fun working with Craig, and we had a great crew.
Nice. Well, because Arnold as well, he there was the comic strip, but then also obviously the claymation too. So that's why
Mhm.
with like the really extreme shapes that Craig had talked about with Hey Arnold. Yeah, it's so I love all that stuff. Just kind of the origin stories of these beloved shows. That's really amazing.
Yeah, he had a very specific style too, where it was like we would paint the underpainting and then we would use colored pencils on top. So this is before digital work, obviously, but it was a process because you had to use all these colored pencils. And it's funny, like when Craig had just been doing it on his own, he never thought of it as like a production process, like how do we turn this into a so it was laborious, but it
Mm.
was a lot of fun. But you don't think of it that way. You're like, okay, we have to mimic his personal style and turn it into a like production line. So that can be
That
challenging.
that's what's interesting because like all of you are unique individuals in your own right, artists in your own right with your own voice, your own style, but then you're collectively developing a personality for a show. So that is, yeah, it's like kind of like you're I don't know, you have to be on the same page, but then also collaborate. I don't know. I find it really fascinating, obviously.
No, that's so interesting what you're saying because it is exactly that where
Mm.
and also you need to maintain a certain amount of your own talents because that's why they hired you in the first place, is because you're a good painter, or Carol has this great sense of color, so let's hire her for this. So you got to maintain that and hold on to it and give their project the best parts of you that will work for their project, but then understanding who they are at the same time. And what's really cool though, having worked on many, I think over 30 TV series, is you start to see how things change. Like The Simpsons started out as the shorts, with Matt Groening, and Wes worked on those, and David Silverman also. And then when we got on series, it evolved quite a bit, and it's because of all the people that are brought on and the fact that you have to make it a production process for hundreds of people to work on. And little by little, it evolves and it becomes what it is now.
Absolutely. I know because as I was telling you before we started recording that I had watched a documentary about The Simpsons, and those early shorts, like the style certainly is different, but even the characters themselves, like Lisa isn't Lisa yet. She's kind of was like a female version of Bart. And obviously
Right.
Homer doesn't like it's still he was still voiced by Dan Castellaneta, but he didn't quite have his Homer dopiness yet. I do find that really interesting how things evolve. Even again, like with Hey Arnold, how the color scheme changed from the pilot to then the series,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Yeah, that's interesting to me. With Rugrats too, I know because it was only like Tommy, Phil, and Lil, and E.G. Jelly
Mm-hmm.
wasn't voicing him yet. Yeah, I really find it interesting when things change early on in productions and stuff. I don't know. I find it very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, you really know your history.
Listen, I am a Nickelodeon nerd, absolutely. I tell you, so when I was first visiting here in Burbank back in August when I was looking for apartments, at one point I passed by the Nickelodeon studios in Burbank, and my entire being just lit up. I'm like, oh my God, I want to work there someday. I'm telling you, yeah, it's just because kind of like ingrained in me, honestly. I don't know, it's just too funny because growing up on these series that means so much to me personally from my childhood and then to today, influencing my work too, honestly, like as a writer and things like that. So yeah, so because it's interesting because all of you working on these shows having influences of, like you said, Charles Schultz, Peanuts, and Looney Tunes, etc. I know, of course, Craig Bartlett was influenced by Charles Schultz and Peanuts as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we, in our generation, we become influenced by all of you. So, and Hey Arnold and all these wonderful shows. So it just keeps on giving. It's
It
beautiful.
does. I know. It's very cool. I
It
love it.
really is. So then, of course, so you worked at Klasky Schupo and Nickelodeon. I'd love to hear also about your work on some Cartoon Network series. And because I love, for instance, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. So I'd love to hear about your work on that series too.
Yeah, I love that show. Well, I started out I was freelancing for Craig McCracken and a few other people over at Hanna-Barbera before Hanna-Barbera like ended and became Cartoon Network. So we were working on Two Stupid Dogs back then, and I was just doing like little paintings, little comps, and it was really fun. But I got to work on that. And then, so when Craig was doing Foster's, he already knew my work and hired me to come on and do development and then to work on the series. And so I got to help design the look. And again, you're working with Craig, who has a very specific way of doing things. And yet he gave me a ton of freedom. Like I had a lot of freedom. And then also I was influenced by Mary Blair, and I really wanted it to look kind of like that. And then I was working with this brilliant background designer, Dave Dunnett, who I believe he won an Emmy for the series. And so he was designing the backgrounds, I was doing the paintings, and I got to spend weeks just painting and gouache on little things, just designing and painting and designing and painting. And then we took it to series and had to put everything into Illustrator on a computer. So we had to transfer it to that, but it worked well. It came out really nice. I
Oh,
like
right.
it.
Because that series was done on Flash, correct? I
Yeah,
think.
it was done on Flash.
Because so yeah, because then like obviously having the consistency throughout. So then did you help design the iconic Foster's home?
Yeah. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, Dave Dunnett drew it. And but I think Craig McCracken also, I think he did a lot of early designs that were, you know, I can't even remember. It's been so long. I just saw him last night at the Annie's too. We were just
Oh,
talking about this. It's like, it seems like years, it is a long time ago. But no, Craig already has, like I said, he has a very specific style and he has kind of a retro thing. So he already had some of that going. And then Dave Dunnett did a lot of design, and then I did a lot of design. And it became what it is. Yeah, it looks really cool.
Because just the intro of it being drawn and then the
Mhm.
color, yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I just saw the what was it? Craig's his speech that he gave at the Annie Awards. It was so touching and like made me tear up. It was like that was beautiful that he got that
It
achievement award.
was.
That's like fantastic. Yeah. I know Foster's is coming back though. I think for a younger audience, but that's still really cool.
It
And
is. It was a really good project. Definitely. I love that one. That's one of my most proud design projects that I've actually gotten to do a lot of cool stuff for. And we were just talking about it last night because he said, "Yeah, I remember coming in your room and grabbing all the little paintings because I had like a million of these little comps, of like the house and the dining room, all the different rooms and outside and just, different areas. And they were all over my desk and painted in gouache. And everyone just came in and grabbed them
nice.
before they got taken away by the studio.
Oh
I
wow.
think everyone on the crew has at least one or two of those little comps.
Oh
And I have
good.
two as well.
Oh, nice. That's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And I know you also worked on the Powerpuff Girls movie as well.
I worked
Powerpuff,
on the movie. That was so fun.
nice.
Yeah, I love that. Again, it was freelance, so I was not on full time. It was so great. I got to basically design, color and lighting for specific sequences, and again, there were very small paintings, and then they'd send them overseas where they would do the production work. But it was a blast, and it was so fun. Like working with Craig is great because his color sense and my color sense are very similar. And so when they want danger or something like that, I go red. Like it is
Mhm.
bright red. Here we go, red. And when the bombs are going off and everything. And I really like working like that in that very graphic style. So it was a lot of fun to work on.
Oh, nice. That's really amazing. I mean, Powerpuff Girls is coming back too. So like all these things that they
Yeah.
live on. So that's really cool. I'm excited for that. With
Yeah.
'cause that too was a big influence, like those shows on Cartoon Network for me growing up too, because who didn't love the Powerpuff Girls, I feel. It's too funny because I think Craig McCracken, he mentioned in his speech that it like person said, "Oh, this is a terrible show, you should be fired," whatever. But then look at it now, just goes to show, like, just always believe in your vision and everything. That's how I
Right.
get from that, which is very important to remember, I would say.
That happened with SpongeBob too.
Oh yeah, and then look at it. It's a powerhouse. It's a number one. It's
Mhm.
amazing. Like that's crazy to think.
It tested horribly. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And then like it just
Yeah,
goes to show you.
testing doesn't always work.
I was oh see that's so interesting to me because it just goes to show you never know what's going to be a hit. You never know what's going to resonate and truly take off. They say that like every hit is a fluke, so to speak, which I find that interesting too, because basically it's like you have to kind of prove yourself too, and
Mhm.
just everything has to kind of find its audience. And then sometimes with shows, whether it's animation or live action, that sometimes it takes a while to find its footing with an audience and everything. That's why it's certainly different when you look at, say, shows that people binge on streaming versus shows that are week to week. I don't know.
Mhm.
I find all that interesting as well, and how things have shifted with that because now there's not appointment viewing anymore. Everyone just kind of watches things at their own pace. So that's definitely certainly changed the
It
market in
has.
general. Yeah.
No, it's very different now. And I think it's helped actually. Rick and Morty is so popular and I love working on that show now. And I've been on it for 10 years. It it was not popular at first and people didn't really know it, but I think it actually helped the digital, all of the streaming and everything. I think that just helped it and now it's just so popular. But
That's
that
true.
definitely changed things for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting because you're right. Sometimes shows they're not necessarily people aren't watching them live, but then they're watching them on streaming. So then, yeah, they find
Mhm.
their audience.
Yeah.
Um, I could just like if we'd be here all day, if I'd go to each one of the projects she worked on. So we're just like touching on a few. I'd love to hear about. It's a show I've been wanting to check out because I find it interesting. Green Eggs and Ham, actually, about your experience working on that project too.
That was beautiful. That show's
It
gorgeous.
looks
I
beautiful.
mean,
Yeah, I'm like, I gotta
oh,
check
it's
it out. And I
beautiful.
love Dr. Seuss. That was like my favorite growing up, reading those books over and over as a child. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really know how that was going to be accepted because of that, because those books are so important to our culture already, and everybody already has an image of what that looks like. So, but they had a really big budget and Warner Brothers, and I worked on the first season, and I did color on that season, and it was gorgeous, just gorgeous. They had the money to make it, to hire enough people and take the time to make it really kind of cinematic. So I'd say it's closer to feature quality, not quite, but almost there. It's pretty close for a television show. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Because I just seen, I remember like the trailers for. I'm like, wow, this looks gorgeous. Because as a kid, I remember like the one animated special of it, like with just telling the story as is with Sam I Am and stuff. That's too funny. Oh gosh,
Right.
that's amazing. They made it into a series, and it looked absolutely beautiful. Like
It's
so.
totally different because it's more, they're big stories now. It's not like the original books where that's a very simple concept and,
Mm.
the rhyming and which I love. Those are like my favorite books. I mean, those are the best.
Me too, because actually I've been taking classes for picture book writing and illustration and things like that. And there's separate classes just for rhyming. And obviously with Dr. Seuss, he's still like his books are timeless, certainly with the rhyming, but even like the nonsense words and things like that. Kids love that stuff. So like they'll always have each generation that can fall in love with those books, definitely.
Yeah.
I'd love to also ask you about it's another show I've been wanting to check out. It's a popular Disney show. You worked on Amphibia as well.
Yeah, that's a yeah, oh, beautiful show. I worked on the first season and then I freelanced on this last third season as well in the finale. Um, I did color design on the first season. It was great. It was in between seasons on Rick and Morty. So on Rick and Morty, I have a very, very stressful, high pressure supervisor job. And then, it's really nice to take a job like Amphibia and do just beautiful color work and have someone else worry about supervising and just do the job and make things look beautiful and be creative. It was a lot of fun and it's a beautiful show. I think it's a really good show too. It's very clever. The stories are good. It's well done.
It's like another thing I've been meaning to check out. That's the thing. It's like there's so much content out there, which it's too funny. Like so many shows I've been meaning to check out, but that's really cool. And then you had also worked on Dexter's Lab too. Like that's like early days of Cartoon Network too.
I only
And
freelanced on Dexter's, so I only did a few I did BG paint, so I would paint some backgrounds here and there. It wasn't a lot of work, so it's not like one of my biggest credits, although it was a lot of fun to do and work with Gendy and it was a good show too. That's a great
yeah,
show. I would say Over the Garden Wall is when I really got to kind of like dive in and do the whole series. There was another color designer on it as well, but I think I did 9 out of 10 episodes. So I can't remember how many. And then, yeah, and then I was freelancing that at night while during the day I was supervising on a community GI Jeff episode at,
I was going to ask you about that
Starburns.
project as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Community. I binged it just several months ago because now the movie's they're finally making the 6 seasons and the movie. They're making the movie finally. I'd love to hear about that experience too, working on that.
Oh, well, so I was working at Starburns on Rick and Morty. I worked on the pilot and then so I was hired, first season and it was kind of similar to Klasky Chupo where other projects would come in and so we would work on them like pilots or anything. And then Dan Harmon, his office was next to mine and so he had this community episode that they wanted to do, as GI Jeff, GI Joe, and I was already there. So, and I was in between stuff on Rick and Morty again, so there you're available, you're like ready. And so I was able to supervise. I was the color supervisor on that, and background. I think I was the background paint. I don't remember. I was a supervisor, and I had a few painters, and it was really fun because it's community, you
Yeah.
know? It's hilarious. I love community, and Dan is a genius, and yeah, it's
Com-
brilliant.
Community is absolutely brilliant. There's another episode where it's like it's a video game. Like there's so many really clever. There's another one where it's stop motion. Like they play around with so many different genres and so many tropes in TV, and it's like really, really fantastic. I'm excited for the movie. It's going to be very meta. I already am very excited. I could
Yeah,
just
well,
tell.
Dan is very much into meta.
Yeah. I know
We
it's
have
big
a
on Rick and
lot of
Morty
that.
too. That's
We
too
have a
funny.
ton. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was talking over you.
No, you're good. I get excited. I don't mean to
I
speak over
know.
you either. Sorry.
It's
Oh
okay.
gosh. I
Yeah.
appreciate you because like I never realized like we're jumping around your career. I appreciate that like you're bearing with me as I bring up shows and everything. Because I also would love to. I forgot to mention also I'm also a big fan of Rocko's Modern Life. I'd love to hear about that too.
Okay. Well, so I was at Klasky working on Edith Ann, and I was assistant art director on that show, and they were just starting to hire on Rocko's Modern Life, and our producer at Klasky Chupo was married to the producer on Rocko's Modern Life. So they were like, "We let's get Carol over on Rocko's Modern Life." And I had not met Joe Murray yet, but I went over and interviewed with him, and he hired me, and that was great. So I was hired as a color supervisor, and there was already a background paint supervisor, and I think he became the art director eventually. But yeah, so I went over to supervise. It was different because it was still early in the Nickelodeon history, so they were still kind of figuring things out. It wasn't even called Nickelodeon at that time. We were working for Games Animation, which was part of MTV Networks.
Hmm.
And so it was all, they were still figuring all their network stuff out. But it was that early on. But when I started on that, I had to kind of it was different. I had to teach people kind of how the production works, for our department, for color and design, in our design area, and how to get things to overseas and how to prep them, and, make sure it's a process that can, that's tenable.
Yeah.
And so that was difficult because I had to teach a lot. I had to help people learn a lot. But it was great working with Joe. I ended up marrying him and having two kids.
Oh
So,
wow.
that worked out okay.
Uh-huh.
And we're not married now, but we
Oh,
have
okay.
beautiful kids.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean that evolved over time.
Yeah.
But no, he was great. He's super talented. Everybody on the show was super talented. We're still really good friends. All of the crew members, we hang out almost like every 2 weeks we get together. There are a
Oh,
bunch of us that still get together.
that's wonderful just having the lifelong friendships then from all these
Yeah.
projects over the years. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing in and of itself. But I mean, Rocko came back too with the Static Cling special, which was I loved that too. That was so good.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's super talented, and he had some really great writers on the show, and it was also a storyboard driven show. So storyboard artists were telling the story as well. I don't know if they got story credit, if they got writing credits, but I think they're starting to now. I think a lot of storyboard driven shows are getting writing credits
Oh,
because you
good.
are writing, you are inventing a lot of stuff that's happening.
Absolutely good for them. They absolutely should if like you're
Mm,
creating the story from
mhm,
boards. Absolutely. And because I know that a lot of people who worked on Rocko went on to work on SpongeBob SquarePants, of
mhm,
course, the creator himself, the late Steven Hillenburg. So
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, Steven, oh, Steve was so sweet. Yeah, that's really sad. Well, he was a director on Rocco, and then Joe moved him up to showrunner. So Joe could kind of step back a little bit because it's I've gotten to see what it happens when you're a show creator. It's pretty intense. But he stepped back a little, turned over delegated some of it to Steve Hillenburg, and then Steve started developing SpongeBob while he was still on Rocko. And we all loved it. We all thought it was really cool. But of course, then, it was testing badly. It took a while for it to sell. And then, yeah, he went on to do his own show. And yeah, everyone from Rocko, it was like perfect timing because Rocko ended. And then they were able to just go right on. They followed Steve.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because even like the early influences in SpongeBob, like it's similar, like the spirit from Rocko is there, like even with Squidward, like, Mr. and Mrs. Big Head, like with the neighbor, like stuff like that. And even Heifer, kind of like Patrick a little bit. So yeah, I find that interesting too. So,
Well, some of the same actors as well,
oh
he
yeah, of
hired,
course.
yeah.
Mr. Lawrence, Tom Kenny. Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool though. And so for you having been in this industry for, you said over 35 years, and then you worked in both the mediums in terms of traditional and digital art. I'd love to hear for you, do you have a preference between the two? Was it difficult moving from traditional to digital? Like when, that happened with all cartoons, then they went from like, it was kind of like, I remember that as a kid, like 1 minute it was cell, the hand drawn, then all of a sudden all the cartoons were digital, and it was like, oh, like these are newer episodes. I remember that. That's too funny. So I'd love to hear your perspective about that.
Well, so I'm kind of lucky because on The Simpsons, we were actually the first TV series to use computers, and that was way before it transferred over to computers. It was at least 6 years before production started to switch over. And we had those little Macs with floppy disks. And it was my department, we were the only department. So color was the department with the computers. And it was basically so we could color on the computer and not have to paint as many cells, save time that way. And so it was a learning curve. Like, I had to learn. Oh, I was just telling someone this story. It was hilarious. I was sitting at a desk every day trying to learn the Mac, not knowing anything about it. Matt Groening would come in and sit next to me because we had to translate everything onto the computer now. And we were laughing so hard because like sometimes everything would disappear and we would just start laughing. We're like, I don't know what to do. Do you know what to do? and
Oh,
and it just became this thing of like turn it off and turn it back on again. That became like computers were that simple back then, where you could just turn it off and turn it back on, and that kind of solved your problem. But it was brand new, so I had to incorporate that into my department, and everyone that was hired to do color had to work on a Mac. So that was back in like what, 1991, maybe 90. So that was early on. So I had already had some of that experience, and then I did some freelance for Sony on I can't remember what. Oh, anyway, I had to do it on computers, but I already had the experience, so I was learning that. And that was kind of a transition time. I'd say around 95, 96, 97, somewhere in there, things started to shift over and everyone was learning it. But thankfully, I already knew it. So it was really great because I was working in this very simple program and it just kept evolving. I mean, they were calling me to ask, what do we need to fix on this? How would this work better? And very simple programs. And then they developed into, eventually Photoshop and all the Adobe programs that we work on now. And it was awesome because I was able to just shift right into it. But I do miss some things about the traditional stage. The traditional painting on paper or board, for backgrounds and things like that, you couldn't revise them like we do now. Like now we're on a computer, we have so many options. We can make things look incredibly sophisticated, really highly detailed and beautiful cinematography now. But the problem is you can do so much. So, everybody's like, let's try this, or let's, can we just revise this 5, 6, 7 times? And in the past, when you were painting, you had to be deliberate and do it, from instinct. You just painted. I mean, we were used to it. So you had very few revisions because it took a lot of time to revise. So you would do the work, turn it in, and it usually was really good because it had to be good right off the bat. So nowadays, like on Rick and Morty, with people turning in work, background painters turning in work, they turn in these gorgeous things, but they know that they're going to do revisions. So they turn in a little bit simpler versions from the get-go because they know I'm going to have to do this like 3 more times. So, it's kind of it works people hard now, but you can do so much cool stuff now.
Nice. That's really interesting too. So, because I guess obviously with hand drawing, you have to be more meticulous. I mean, because it takes longer, more or less, right? Because just like doing hand drawn traditional, whereas now with digital, at least it's quicker in that sense to fix things. That's interesting, kind of the pros and cons of both of them.
It actually takes longer digitally
Oh,
because,
hmm,
yeah, painting on board, you could get like 2 or maybe even 3 paintings done in a day.
hmm.
Whereas now, with digital paint, I don't know about other productions, but on our production, it takes so long to paint a background and then to do the revisions. I mean, sometimes backgrounds are reworked over and over again, and it's a lot of time. That's days of work on one background. So it's very different now in that, you can keep changing your mind, and sometimes that's not good. Sometimes that
Hmm.
wears people out.
Hmm.
I
Interesting.
try and keep my crew excited.
Yeah, of course. Because otherwise, then it's like could be getting lost in the weeds, right? And like kind of tedious, and yeah, kind of forgetting that it's still
Yeah,
like well, you want to be enjoying yourself too, and like the creativity.
right.
Yeah. Because then, yeah, I guess obviously it's still a job too, so I guess that's tough too. I'm sure sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier, or whatever. Yeah, but I
Right.
mean. Rick and Morty, you have such like gorgeous backgrounds, obviously so intricate and detailed because they go literally anywhere in any universe. So yeah, that's because I could picture like certain beautiful backgrounds and that's still like so detailed and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's so fun. I actually really love our show is so hard. Rick and Morty is it's very time consuming and very there's a lot of pressure to push it really far. We invent so many new worlds and then we destroy them and kill everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone must be murdered in some horrific way. And sometimes those are really funny shots too, but it is a ton of work, but at the same time I kind of like the challenge. I mean, I love working on a children's show. Like I'll freelance on Amphibia and I'll work on that and get to do some lighter, lighter things, and have more fun with just simplicity and color, and then come back to Rick and Morty and be highly detailed and very meticulous. So it's fun to have both.
Right. I was going to ask you also about working in children's animation versus adult animation. Do you have a
Mhm.
preference between the two? Is one easier than the other, or just your thoughts on that?
They're very different. I hire a lot of people from children's cartoons, and because I've worked on both, I really know how this works. But there's a simplicity to children's cartoons that it can make it a little bit easier in terms of the work because things aren't it's not as important if things hook up exactly from shot to shot. The lighting can change and it doesn't matter as much. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter because it does matter, but it's not as meticulous as it is in adult cartoons. And I know this because it started on The Simpsons. It's our fault for making it. It's Brad Bird, David Silver, it's these guys. It's all their fault
Hmm.
that they made it so good and so all the hookups, all of everything has to match exactly. So every adult cartoon has that mentality. And so our show's the same way. Like, you if you move around a room, everything is there and everything is exactly in the same place as if you're moving a camera around a room. And in children's cartoons, it's a little bit more fanciful and you can have more fun with it. So it's not preferring one over the other. It's just they're very different. And I like doing both.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, because there's so much rich storytelling in both, obviously, too. And
Mhm.
I find it fascinating too with adult animation that it can go on for years and years and like no end
Mhm.
in sight. Case in point, The Simpsons. I mean, and that
Yeah.
kind of more or less was the foundation for all these other series that have seen success. Bob's Burgers, South Park, all these other shows. So yeah, Family Guy, etc. So many.
It was the first. I mean,
Yeah.
there had been the Flintstones before and the Jetsons. They had been on, but not to the success of the Simpsons. And so when the Simpsons aired, we were pretty sure we would be out of a job like, next week because we're like,
Oh.
who's going to watch this?
Hmm.
And it was on Fox, and at that time Fox was a cable network and not even in every state. So it was, you had to pay for cable, first of all, and you had to even have cable in your state at the time when it aired. So it's amazing that it took off at all. And that was pretty amazing, but it did set the standard. It was the beginning. It was like we were making a sitcom, an animated sitcom.
Mhm.
And it took off like a sitcom. It's a family, all the family issues, but because it's a cartoon, you can do whatever you want. And then all the other shows came after that.
Yeah, because also being the first primetime adult
Mhm.
animated series. So that really, yeah, obviously is groundbreaking too. And now it's just funny because now, like, over 30 years later and still going, and it's just kind of more or less, I don't know, people still watching it, obviously. So yeah, that's
It's
funny.
so amazing that it's still going. And, I know people who've left, gone
Hmm.
back. I think even David Silverman like left for a while, came back and did the movie. Then, he does other projects. And I know Wes was on for a long time. Wes, is now he does Rick and Morty. He's going to do King of the Hill. It's so they all, everybody jumps around, but there's all the Simpsons, it's still
Yeah.
there. That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing. I love that.
That is amazing because I forgot King of the Hill was coming back too. And then obviously Matt Groening working on new Futurama. That's coming back
Mhm.
as well, like another iteration of it. I love that these things just honestly live on endless, like, they can always come back. It's good. I'm holding out for more, hopefully, BoJack Horseman. That's one of my all-time favorite animated
Mm,
shows too,
that's a
honestly.
great one. I love it.
Yeah, because again, like all this goes back to the early influences of like again Charles Schultz, because that really is so foundational with Peanuts. Like, of course, it's for children, but then adults can learn things from it too, with it being so ubiquitous and like that's what I love about it. The simplicity of it, and like what I've always been told in terms of great writing is to have complicated characters in simple situations. And I agree
Right.
with that. Yeah, wouldn't you say that? Agree too? Mhm.
Wow, that I think you said that
Right.
perfectly. I feel like that is what makes everyone able to relate to a cartoon character
Hmm.
is it's the personality. I think you're exactly right with that. They're so complex and they're like people, like,
Yeah.
and then they have all the relatable qualities and emotions, and that makes us care about an actual cartoon character. Like, from Disney films, Pixar films, all of the films and TV shows. I mean, it's amazing that you can cry watching a cartoon. Like it's not a real person. And somehow we've managed to make situations and characters feel human and feel real. And I think you're right. I think it's the very complex nature of the character themselves. And then the situations are, yeah, just relatable situations. Someone dies, or someone's lost, or someone's trying to get home, very simple situations.
That's very true, because what I've always been told too is like personal is universal, because really like all of you that you when you work on these shows, you are putting a piece of yourself into the storytelling, whether it is like just small pieces with the characters, whatever it may be, like kind of your like own personal thing, even though it is obviously all one style, but still, yeah, I find that really just a wonderful thing too, it's like
No, that's a really
heart
good
into it.
point. I agree.
Yeah, just like putting your heart into it. So, I would actually also love to ask you about your gallery exhibition. So, how does it like, what do you do in terms of like submitting your work and going about choosing what pieces you want to showcase with things like that?
Well, for me, I already was doing my own painting when I graduated from college, and even in college. I already had a very specific style of my own, which is why I was hired to do illustration. They knew what they were going to get. They hired me for my style, this type of painting that I did. And I would do very sarcastic, large paintings, and then I would paint the frames and make everything. So I already had lots of those, and I just kind of started having group shows at coffee shops and little galleries, and then La Luz de Jesus, and then just getting together with friends, and we would go to the owner and say we wanted to do a show, and they loved our work, so they would put it in and they would schedule it. So it was fairly easy process back then.
Nice.
I how do you know what to choose to? That is hard.
Hmm.
And people don't realize how hard that is. First of all, if you have your own show, which I've had, you have to produce quite a lot of work. Like it could be like 30 paintings. I mean, it depends on how big they are, but a lot. It's a ton of work. And then deciding what to put in the show is really important. How much to price things is it's really
Hmm.
complicated. But I just find it depends on where you are in your career. I think a lot of painters, unless you're like pretty famous and well known, you're not going to make a lot of money in a gallery because they
Hmm.
take 50 or 60% anyway. So if
Oh,
you,
wow.
yeah,
Hmm.
you're already losing money. So,
Wow. Hmm.
so it's really a labor of love. I mean, all these galleries and all of these artists that show, it's a labor of love. They're not making money off of it unless they're pretty well known and they're getting commissions and things like that. When people say starving artists, that's kind of where that comes from, I believe. It's from galleries, from, exhibiting your artwork as a singular artist, and who you are. And you have to develop over time.
That's the thing. I've obviously so much time and effort going into it, and then like your own passion and like your own kind of in a sense vulnerability, because it's like you're putting yourself out there with your work. So yeah, that's interesting too.
Yeah, it
Um,
is vulnerable. It is
hmm,
true because I think it was the first time I really realized that I need to be careful what I say, when I'm in a gallery opening or something, because there are press people around and you don't even think about it. You're just like having a show with your friends or by yourself and it's woohoo, I'm showing
hmm,
my work and
right.
people might buy it. And then all of a sudden someone's interviewing you from the paper or the
Huh.
magazine and you're like, oh, this is like serious.
Nice.
Wait, I'm a real artist now. So yeah, kind of it's kind of scary because it brings a whole new element to it where before you were really just doing it for yourself and hoping to make some money. And then all of a sudden it becomes a business and it's like, oh, this is a business. I need to treat it more like a business.
That's interesting. Yeah, because like the creativity aspect, but that's important too, the business aspect as well. Yeah, that's fair enough. You know, um, this is a simple question, but I am just curious. Do you have a favorite color to work with, or just yeah, I'd love to hear a favorite color.
I actually do have favorite like palettes that I like.
Mm,
It's ironic because I work on such a bright show and I paint my own style is very electric, kind of neon colors. I love bright
yeah.
color. But actually for my preference, like I
Mm.
really love seeing people who do things that are more monochromatic and more grayed out and more, I guess like natural tones, mixed colors like muted greens and grays, and just I really love seeing. It's hard to do, and I enjoy doing it myself. Like it's practice, trying to get things to be more monochromatic and grayed out, but still look really good. And people who can just do that naturally, they're amazing to me. But those are usually my favorite colors. Those are things I would want to buy and put on my wall, or those are things that I like to look at as well. So I'd say muted tones.
Oh, nice. No, it's beautiful though. It's like the warmth of it too. But then I love also like contrast of things too, because like I'm picturing just like stuff in Rick and Morty, like the bright blues and greens and stuff like that. That makes it stand out. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because our one of our art directors, James McDermott, who's been on since the beginning, where we've known each other since the beginning. He and I have similar taste in color. The brights, the bright colors,
Mm.
like very similar. Where we like to do complementary colors and really pop things like that. It gives a lot of drama and it just looks gorgeous. To use like reds and greens, and then cobalt blues, and really like you can really punch things that way. And also it gives it a sci-fi vibe. And it's great because that's naturally how I work anyway. And that's, I think, naturally how he works as well, and kind of works for Rick and Morty. So
Nice. Yeah. And we've touched on a lot Peanuts as well. Do you have a favorite Peanuts character? I know you mentioned Snoopy.
Oh, I used to just love Snoopy when I was a kid. I like all the characters. I think they're just hilarious. Now
Yeah.
I kind of love Lucy, and she's hilarious. I
Mhm.
mean, I love that she set up a psychiatric
Yeah.
stand, and you put
Mhm.
money in the cup and get advice. I thought that was hilarious. Just brilliant, such brilliant ideas.
You're right, because it's the relationships between the characters, Charlie Brown and Lucy, Linus and Lucy, Linus and Charlie Brown, Sally, etc., Schroeder. So you're right. It's not just, but personally, I would say Charlie Brown because I always root for the underdog. But,
Right,
you know,
he's brilliant. Yeah.
yeah, that's too funny. And then, like, say Lucy, for instance, you see the early influences leading to, of course, Helga Pataki, Angelica Pickles. So that's too funny.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
totally. And and it really does, it follows the traditional lines of comedy though. All you always need a straight character, and the
Mhm.
like Seinfeld, or Charlie Brown, or someone has to be the straight character and all the crazy happens around them. And that's the way comedy works. You have to have the crazy, but you can't be the crazy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. The straight man character, yeah, because then
Mhm.
bouncing off of the crazy.
You're
That's
right.
oh my goodness. Carol, this hour has flown by. So as we're wrapping up, my last question I always like to ask is if you have any advice for artists in this case. So that can be advice you've learned personally or just any sort of life advice, anything at all you'd care to share.
Ooh, life advice. I didn't think about that
Sure.
one.
Yeah, anything.
Easy to give career advice. Well, first of
Hmm.
all, in animation, if you're going into animation, um, don't give up. It's hard. It's very competitive now. I mean, I'm competing with 20-year-olds now. And there are so many schools spitting out animation people, I think the only reason why I keep working is because I have knowledge. I have knowledge of how to make things go a little faster and a little smoother. But everybody's super talented now, so you really have to compete. And in order to compete, you can't give up. You can't take things personally. It's really easy to take things personally. People are in bad moods just like they are when they're driving, and you just can't take it personally. And also network, like call up your favorite artists or animation people that you love and ask them for coffee. They'll talk to you. Animation artists are like the nicest, greatest people, and they love to chat with fans or people that want information. we're all very supportive of one another. So even though we're competing, we're very supportive. So never give up, network, and do not take anything personally. I guess do not take anything personally works in your personal life as well. I'm not very good at that, but it's something I recommend. And save money.
Listen, that's really good advice, very practical. It's true. Sometimes it is difficult though to not take things personally, but you're right. It's kind of like reminding yourself that separating yourself from whatever someone else may be going through. But yes, that's an important reminder, definitely.
It's always that way because, animation's collaborative. You're going to work with someone, you might hate this person that you're working with. And then this has happened to me. 20 years later, you're working with that person and they're the greatest and you're having a great time. So, you don't want to make any enemies and you don't want to take things too personally. I mean, obviously, if there's harassment or something, you report it, but it's usually someone's having a bad day, someone's really tense, whatever, maybe their baby stayed up all night. People are working hard and they bring it to work, their personal lives to work. So, some people who've been in it for a while are better at kind of pushing that to the side. But I know when you're young, especially the younger artists that come in, they haven't learned that yet. They're still like, not understanding that everybody has different things going on. So it's important to just pay attention to yourself and what you need to get through this career. And if you even like this career, it's not for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well said. So Carol, if there's anything you'd like to promote, your social media, any other projects you care to promote now?
The only thing I have right now is Rick and Morty, which we lost last night, although Frank Gladstone said we didn't lose, we just didn't win. So
that's good perspective.
I guess that's true. But no, that's the only show I really have going right now. I mean, obviously there's a movie Community, and Dan's got a lot of projects going on. He's really great. I love Amphibia. If people want to watch Amphibia, and the show creator from Amphibia is the sweetest. And no, and I don't really have anything, but even my website isn't updated, so I can't really promote that right now.
No worries.
There's a lot on there, but it's not updated. It's not up to today. So
nice. Yeah, that's all good. Well, because you worked on so much stuff. So yeah, that's too funny.
It's full. You can go look at it. It's full. It doesn't have the last 2 years or 3 years, but that's fine.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So much fun chatting with you, Carol. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Check out storytellingsaga.com, and as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next episode, since we brought up community during this interview, I thought I would discuss what is regarded as one of the best episodes of the series, Remedial Chaos Theory. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.